Let's begin with something fundamental. If we're going to understand the unique power of what's often called a super empath, we first have to understand the psychological architecture of the relationship they most often find themselves entangled in, namely the dynamic between the narcissist and the empath. Now, this isn't just a pop psychology pairing that makes for catchy social media content. It's a deeply rooted psychological interaction with ancient archetypal implications. Think of it as the shadow meeting the light, only this isn't metaphor. It's pattern recognition at the level of human nature. A narcissist, clinically speaking, operates from a place of profound insecurity wrapped in a facade of inflated self-importance. Their identity is fragile. It's not an integrated self, but a constructed mask, a persona built to manipulate the environment in order to secure admiration, control, and emotional fuel. We call this fuel narcissistic supply. It comes in the form of attention, validation, even fear, whatever keeps the narcissist's ego afloat. And here's the crucial part. They seek relationships not for connection, but for utility. People aren't people in the eyes of a narcissist. They're instruments. Empaths, on the other hand, are wired almost antithetically. They feel deeply not just their own emotions, but the emotions of others. They have a kind of emotional permeability, an openness to the world that allows them to intuit pain, joy, deception, truth. And while that's often celebrated as a gift, and in many ways it also places them at a distinct disadvantage when interacting with manipulative personalities. Their instinct is to heal, to understand, to help. They see the brokenness in others and instinctively reach out, often at their own expense. Now, what happens when these two forces meet? It's predictable in a tragic sense. The narcissist, hungry for attention and control, sees the empath as an ideal source of supply. Someone who gives, often without asking for anything in return. Someone who's willing to rationalize abuse as woundedness. Someone who will absorb the projection, the gaslighting, the cycles of idealization and devaluation. And the empath, believing love can heal all wounds, buys into the illusion, believes they've found someone they can help, someone who needs them. But this dynamic isn't love. It's a psychological dance of codependency and exploitation. The narcissist uses the empath as a mirror to maintain their false self-image. And the empath, if unaware, becomes complicit in their own emotional erosion, mistaking trauma for purpose, intensity for intimacy. The cost, selfhood. But here's where things get interesting. Not all empaths stay blind. Not all remain passive. There is a rare type, the one we're focusing on today, the super empath, who begins to see the pattern. This type of empath is still deeply feeling, still highly intuitive, but they've developed an additional trait, awareness, psychological insight, and crucially, boundaries. They start to see through the mask. They begin to question the narrative. And when that happens, everything shifts. You see, once an empath becomes conscious of the narcissist's tactics, once they step outside the illusion and begin to analyze the dynamic rather than simply react to it, they fundamentally alter the power structure of the relationship. They move from being a source of supply to being a threat to the narcissist's control. And it's in that moment that the entire game begins to fall apart. The empath wakes up and the narcissist loses grip. That awakening doesn't just liberate the empath, it exposes the narcissist. And this is why the super empath is the one person a narcissist cannot truly control, because control depends on illusion, and the super empath is the one who sees. So if you're someone who feels deeply, who's been told you're too sensitive, or who's spent years trying to save someone who never asked to be saved, pause and ask yourself, what if the thing you thought was your weakness has always been your greatest strength? The moment you stop absorbing the lie and start confronting the truth, you don't just escape manipulation, you shatter the system that made it possible. Now that we've established the nature of the empath-narcissist dynamic, we can begin to isolate what distinguishes the super empath from the more general category of empath. This is not a trivial distinction. It's the difference between someone who gets caught in the same destructive pattern repeatedly and someone who breaks the pattern entirely. And in doing so, becomes the narcissist's greatest existential threat. The term super empath isn't clinical, it's descriptive, but what it describes is very real, a personality structure that not only feels deeply, but also sees clearly. A super empath does not simply react to the emotions of others. They understand them, they observe, they analyze, They connect the dots between behavior, intention, and pattern. And that cognitive edge, when combined with high emotional attunement, that creates a person who is not just compassionate, but psychologically formidable. Let's break this down. Ordinary empathy, if you can call it that, is about resonance. It's about being moved by the emotional states of others. But that alone can be dangerous. Resonance without discernment can lead to emotional enmeshment, where the empath internalizes pain that was never theirs to carry. That kind of unfiltered compassion can turn a well-intentioned person into an emotional sponge for toxic people. We've all seen this. Perhaps we've lived it. But the super empath has done something different. They've integrated their emotional sensitivity with intellectual structure. They've learned, often through suffering, that feeling without boundaries is self-destructive. So they adapt. They become disciplined in how they give, when they give, and to whom. They learn to distinguish between someone who is suffering and willing to grow and someone who is suffering and determined to make others suffer with them. This is where the strength of the super empath emerges. Contrary to popular caricature, their strength isn't softness. It's clarity. It's the ability to remain kind without being naive, to remain open-hearted without being easily manipulated, and to say no, clearly, firmly, and unapologetically when the situation demands it. And this, no, is devastating to the narcissist, because the narcissist depends on others remaining confused, emotionally overwhelmed, or trapped in self-doubt. But the super empath doesn't lose themselves in chaos. They become more focused. The more the narcissist tries to destabilize, the more the super empath begins to map the architecture of manipulation. And once they see it for what it is, they stop feeding it. They stop playing the role. You could almost think of the super empath as a kind of moral counterweight to the narcissist. The narcissist seeks power without responsibility. The super empath seeks truth, even at personal cost. And truth, real unflinching psychological truth, is the one thing the narcissist cannot endure. It disrupts their illusions. It threatens the very foundation of their identity, which is built not on authenticity, but on performance. The irony is, the narcissist may initially be drawn to the super empath more intensely than to anyone else. They sense the depth, the light, the emotional insight. And at first, they want it. They believe they can control it. But what they fail to realize is that the super empath is watching. They are not simply reacting. They are cataloging, understanding, discerning. And by the time the narcissist realizes they've underestimated their target, it's often too late. The dynamic has shifted. The game is exposed. And the narcissist finds themselves confronted not with blind loyalty, but with uncomfortable truth. And here's the deeper philosophical insight: power that is rooted in truth is more enduring than power rooted in deception. The super empath doesn't need to dominate or manipulate to be powerful. Their power lies in their refusal to betray reality. That kind of power disarms narcissism at its core. So if you've ever felt that your sensitivity is a weakness, or that your desire to understand others has made you vulnerable, consider this. It's not the feeling that weakens you. It's the lack of clarity around those feelings. The moment you combine empathy with discernment and compassion with truth, you're no longer merely reacting to the world. You're transforming it.